Today we'll be looking at the they-them crowd. Non-binary types who use they-them pronouns. Mostly, I think, for attention, because if you have no personality or social skills, then pick the they-them pronouns, get a septum piercing and dye your hair a colour not found in nature, and soon other people, bereft of any form of character, will pretend to find you interesting. Because I guess misery loves company. But also for many younger people, in particular younger people who are this colour, who've been brainwashed with the mystical notion of white privilege, and I've been on the earth since 1978, my white privilege still hasn't turned up. These are younger people who've been taught to hate themselves, to believe that they're bigots, that they're oppressors. But if they say they're non-binary, that's instant victimhood. They're a they-them. They're not male or female. They don't fit in. And oddly, whereas there used to be real, terrible persecution towards homosexual and bisexual people, which is vile because no one gets to pick their sexuality, that whole movement, the LGBTQIA+ movement, has been somewhat hijacked by, firstly, the militant trans type, and now the militant non-binary types. Now, to my gay and bi friends watching this, I remember that real sweet spot back in the early 2000s where all of us, gays, straights, bis, whatever, we all just got on with each other. But now things are going wrong because of the lunatic progressives, as we will see. Essentially what I think is, the gay rights thing in the West was pretty much done and dusted. So then this new thing's been stirred up and it's ruining things for everyone. Also, to use they-them pronouns, it helps to be pompous, narcissistic, and most importantly, you need to be fuck ugly. So let's start with a clip from the Museum of Manchester. Now, once we've watched part of this clip, because I'm not playing the whole thing, the title for the video could be, Why Not to Come to Manchester? Although if you live in the UK, you've probably got your own reasons.
Hi, my name's Nick, I use they them pronouns, and today we're finding pride in our collection. So as you can see behind me, we've got a lot of birds, a lot of taxidermy birds. And so during the Victorian period was when a lot of these birds were taxidermied. The Victorian period was really run by cis, straight, white men, and it's very clear their perceptions that are shown in these. So the woman was usually seen as quite submissive, that's why she's seen as lower down. The man was seen as very dominant, so that's why he was positioned higher up. And then having the children is really solidifying that nuclear family that was a big thing back then. What's very interesting as well is that when we actually look at the collection that we have, about 80% of the animals and insects are male. So even when we're looking around the museum, most of this isn't proportional to what we see day to day. The reason that people would collect the male species was because a lot of the time they were brighter, they were bolder. Most of the males will have to try and attract a mate, so they had very bright plumage and things like that to try and attract the female to them. But this means that we've actually lost out on a lot of history.
Anyone who introduces themselves and then tells you their pronouns should be avoided, not like the plague, but avoided like a plague that's caught another plague and arrives with a gas bill attached to it. Now I suspect our new friend Nick has been hired just to tick a diversity box. But their point about how in Victorian England, or the Victorian era in general, everything was run by straight, white, cis men, well, there are reasons for that, aren't there? Firstly, the white thing, racial diversity in the UK didn't really take off until the 1950s. Being cisgendered, that wasn't a thing back then. There were a lot of asylums in Victorian England. Anyone who wasn't cis would end up in that. Women's rights, they hadn't really took off yet. Women mainly stayed at home and raised children, unless they were poor, in which they raised children and then worked in a factory or something ghastly. And as for being straight, well, although homosexuality went on, in the Victorian era, being a gay man was illegal. Oddly though, being a lesbian was never banned in the UK because Queen Victoria didn't believe women would do those things. But, at the risk of sounding like a little Englander, back when most of the world was run by empires, and most of those empires were either European or of European ancestry, were things really that bad? If we take the British Empire, yes, it did some bad things, a fair few massacres. But the Brits would rock up in some third world medieval shithole, and within a few decades, that country would have trains, running water, law and order, and such like. Whereas now what we have is people from third world medieval shitholes who've dragged their own country back to before when the Brits got there, and now they're coming to Britain to do the same thing to this small island. And I know I'm going off on a tangent, but who would have thought having mass uncontrolled immigration, both legal and illegal, mostly of military-age young men who've only, if they can read, have read one fucking book, the sort of aggressive version of the Bible, that holy book, that centres around the life of a 7th century warlord, rapist, mass-murdering paedophile. If you take those people and then put them straight into the West, who would have guessed something was going to go wrong? I'll get back to the subject of the video now. Our friend Nick also mentioned the notion of the nuclear family. Now do they have a problem with the model of the family which has been proven to work? Now, as a they-them, I guarantee she's never met her father, and of course there are some great single parents, but countless studies have shown that children raised in two-parent households, not necessarily heterosexual, but to having two parents, two authority figures, are much less likely to end up living a life of criminality. In fact, the whole subtext to what Nick is saying seems to be that they have an issue with a functioning society with law and order where people give each other mutual respect, and the younger people aren't just staring at screens like zombies or running around stabbing each other. And that breakdown of the traditional family, that actually comes from Marxist ideology, and that shouldn't be a surprise because all the gender ideology is based on cultural Marxism. And Nick has a point that 80% of the collection are male animals. That being said, in the modern world, taxidermy itself is rather strange, but she also answers her own question with it by saying that most male birds have brighter plumage, which they do. They have to attract a mate. Female birds tend to have very dull plumage to give them a natural camouflage to protect the eggs and the young. You'd think for someone working in the natural history wing of a fucking museum, she would have heard of Charles Darwin and the origin of the species. Of course, in the human world, in the modern human world, if you see a man dancing outrageously, wearing very bright colours, he's also seeking a mate, but that mate probably isn't female. Anyway, let's move on to another pronoun-obsessed person.
Just a friendly reminder that my pronouns are she and they. So you can stop calling me she all the time. You could call me they too. That's why it's there.
She and they pronouns. Why? Well, again, it'll just be for attention. So she starts off by saying she uses she as a pronoun, which means she would appear to be sane, and then you look at her. But then the they pronoun, which I'm presuming she wants to be used whilst she is present. Now, I've said this many times, if I meet someone, I won't refer to them by their pronouns, I'll ask them their sodding name. Yet I'm guessing she wants people to use they, just to try and stop the unquenchable thirst her ego demands. However, if I met her, I would have only one question. Why have you dyed your eyebrows green? Anyway, something we often hear when it comes to the woke gender ideology nonsense is, which I have to say, a lot of the followers treat it like a religion. They are just as fanatical. But they'll say they're not coming for the kids. The children are not being indoctrinated. Let's make our own minds up.
Excuse us.
How old is she?
They are 15 months old. We actually use they, them pronouns. We're great until they tell us who they are. That's why you were like, who, what?
Oh, wow. Okay, so
They.
Uh-huh. Awesome. Well, enjoy the Pride Parade.
Did you say thank you? Thank you.
We are pulling apart this idea of sex, which is related to genitals, and gender, which is related to how you move in the world. So what you wear, how you share your identity with other people, all of those things are related to gender.
Depending on where you are in the world, we all need different licenses to do different things. In the UK, you need a license to watch live TV. I think we need to start issuing breeding licenses, because you can guarantee with either morons or woke progressives their genitals always work, and these people should not be spawning offspring if that's the way they're going to treat said offspring. So I'm guessing it's a heterosexual couple who are so desperate to prove how fucking woke and progressive they are brainwashing their own child and taking it to a pride parade. Now, in recent years, pride parades have moved away from being about acceptance to just being an exhibition of debauchery and fetishes. Why would anyone take their toddler and get their toddler to participate in such an event? Now, I'm not a parent myself, but I thought the role of a parent is to help educate their child as to their place in the world, to find a sense of identity, to understand who they are from a very young age. These parents are doing the exact opposite. They're not enforcing any rules or any sense of reality. And I'm guessing they're doing it just so they can show how fucking wonderful they are, so that when their child starts school, they can turn up with their rainbow flags and show how much better they are than everyone else. In fact, let's just call it what it is. It's fucking child abuse. It's parents using their child for their own attention. And at the very start of the clip, where the parent explains that it's they-them pronouns, you can hear the hesitation in the voice of the person who asked the initial question. Now, if you're at a pride parade and people are looking at you like you're a bit crazy, fuck me if you got problems. Back at the start of this video, I mentioned that in the Victorian era, there were a lot of asylums. Now, being retro is very popular. I honestly think we need to start opening them back up again. That's the end of this video. If you enjoyed it, please do like and subscribe if you haven't already. And as ever, thanks for watching. We're going to be looking at the non-binary crowd. The they-thems. The attention, the fucking wanky shit bollocks. He and they pronouns. Why? Well, of course, it's just for attention. She fucked it. Pronouns. So why use both? Well, my guess is it's just for attention. Fuck it. Immigration, uncontrolled immigration with undocumented military-age men coming to this country, and if they can read, they've only ever read one book. It's the extremely violent version of the Bible. It is the fucking... You know which book I mean. That's when I can't remember what I meant to fucking say. Go again.